Hello, everyone, and welcome to Relic Law's Interview with an Expert series. I'm Willie Morlowitz, Principal Attorney at Relic Law. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Daniel Shoemaker. Dr. Shoemaker is full professor and graduate program director for the University of Detroit Mercy's Center for Cybersecurity and Intelligence Studies. He leads the Midwest chapter of the Colloquium for Information Systems Security Education and is a distinguished visitor of the IEEE Computer Society. He joins us today to discuss his new book, The Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge. Dr. Shoemaker, we're all very excited to have you here today, and so thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
And so I guess we'll just jump right in and start off with the first question. So you recently co-authored the book, The Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge. Can you give us a brief history on, what led you to write this book?
Well, it's a brand new field. That's the first thing you got to understand. And like a lot of new fields, it's kind of feeling its way along in terms of what actually constitutes the field. It's got a long history in electronic security dating back to, I don't know, maybe even the 1980s. But it's clear that there are other elements to what you need to know in order to be effective. One of the reasons why that's the case is because we're basically having our lunch handed to us by the criminal community. And, given all that, and there's just the general kind of conflict that goes on in any academic setting where people argue about, what's right and what's wrong, or what they ought to teach and what what's not necessary. The societies that basically oversee and dictate to the professions there's three of them, and they basically are kind of they have it divided up based on kind of what you're into. The Association for Computer Machinery, ACM, the IEEE, which Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and the AIS, Association for Information Systems, are the three societies, and basically they're computer science, software engineering, and business information systems, if you turn it onto the academic side. Have generally been the people that have kind of dictated what what knowledge looks like. They do it through task forces, which they bring together, containing experts, and it's rigorous and long-term, usually a 2 or 3 year process. I was actually part of one of the tasks that task force that put this together, but essentially what they're trying to do is to lay down a single definition of the body of knowledge for the profession. And that's what this particular book is. It contains their recommendations, which are extensive. It's in a publication called, I don't, it's funny, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but CSEC 2017. And essentially it's the curriculum guidelines for teaching cybersecurity. The book is nothing more than the kind of taking what amounts to a standard and turning it into an explanation. And, it's kind of everything you want to know about cybersecurity, but we're afraid to ask. And it's long. It contains an awful lot of complicated stuff. And it's not something you're going to be able to memorize, but we intended it to be more of a, kind of something you could pull down off the shelf and use as a reference whenever you hear about stuff that, maybe you didn't know about, or maybe you didn't know was part of the body of knowledge. And that's basically the intent. I might add, it's gotten much better circulation than I expected because it's quite expensive and it's also kind of dense. But people are reading it, so apparently it's struck a nerve somewhere.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as I mentioned to you in our previous conversations, I think this topic is very timely. And, you know, from my perspective as someone who's, you know, out in the field and working with clients, you know, on cybersecurity strategy and trying to help them evaluate and cut through the fog, if you will, of what's out there. The industry is and as a profession is sort of fractured. And I think this movement to try to identify the edges of it is immensely important.
It's something that societies have generally done. Back in 2005, which is the last time they did something like this, they defined the field of computing. And so every cat and dog, you know, operation out there may or may not be, you know, kind of fall into those fields, but that was where it sort of broke it out into computer engineering, computer science, software engineering, information systems, and information technology, and had a definition for each of those. And kind of what you're doing, what you should be doing if you're in that field, you know, kind of what the activities of the field are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important because basically, to quote that great American philosopher Yogi Berra, who none of my students have ever heard of, I might add, you know, you're not secure if you're not secure. And so, you know, it doesn't do you much good to have a really robust partial defense, because the hacking community will is looking for the holes in the defense, and they'll just kind of walk around what walls you built and look for the gap. And so you either have a complete solution or it's no solution at all. And that's basically been our problem. One little bit of information you might find interesting is they've done a kind of the cost of cybercrime study since, I can't remember when Microsoft sponsored it, but it was $500 billion in 2015, which sounds like a lot of money until you look at 2018 when it was $2 trillion. That's with a T. And so it increased by fourfold in a matter of about 3 years. And the expectation is in 2021, it's going to be at 6 trillion. So that's what we're losing. And for perspective, that's the gross national product of England, Germany, and France combined.
Yeah, it's the numbers are quite staggering. That's for sure. Let me take you to question 2, and which is really kind of getting into some parts of the book here. You know, in chapter 1, you compare the current practice of cybersecurity to blind men and the elephant, which is a metaphor I like. And so, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I've been told by certain people that it's also politically incorrect. So, you know, but that's me. The idea basically, I mean, the poem is about, you know, 6 blind men were asked to, it's like a poem from the 19th century, were asked to say what an elephant was by, you know, what they were touching. And so one touched the trunk, it's like a snake, leg, it was like a tree, side was like a wall, tail was like a rope. You know, and the last line of the poem was, in the end, they were all right and also completely wrong. And that's the status of the field right now. If you spend any time in the profession talking to people, you get folks that have got kind of whatever religion they're pushing, and you know, generally it's in electronic security, which is only about, in terms of the amount of losses we've had over the last decade, is only about 29% of the total. The other 71% has been kind of 50-50, has been losses to kind of human factors, social engineering, insider theft, that sort of stuff, and physical losses. Because if I steal your computer, you lose your information, you know. People don't seem to realize that that's just, you know, kind of securing the building or the computer's in and leaving all the doors locked is just as important as having a good firewall. Because if, you know, I can't break your firewall and I can walk off with your computer, that's the way I'm going to go after it. And so the whole push is, and this is sort of what was kind of underlay the kind of the CSEC project, was to knock down the stovepipes and view this as a single discipline set of activities for the profession. And the term they use to describe it is holistic, which I mean, I work for the Jesuits, and so holistic sounds a little bit like holy, but what we're talking about basically is a complete solution, end-to-end solution that has all of the countermeasures necessary to provide an effective defense in all all three attack surfaces. And if you don't know what that term means, basically the way you view any kind of sort of preparation of a defense is to look at the attack surface and sort of look at how it can be attacked. And right now, we spend a lot of time concentrating on the electronic attack surface without any time spent at all on the physical and the human attack surface. And what the CSEC does basically is look at all those surfaces at once as a single integrated set, which hopefully gives you a complete defense.
Yeah, I think that inclusive viewpoint or lens, if you will, is essential, because you're right. It has become a sort of religion, if you will, around certain focuses within cybersecurity, almost to the detriment of the others. And so I think bringing them together in a way that gives each one equal attention is valuable. Let me take you to the next question here, which really I think builds on your work in the academy, which is what is the importance of establishing a defined curriculum for the study of cybersecurity versus the current state that students that are entering the profession through the various means that they do enter the profession. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, every profession, every study starts somewhere. I'm actually old enough to go back to the students all think I go back to the dawn of time, but to remember when computer science didn't exist. It was basically, combination of some form of electrical engineering and something in mathematics. And actually the philosophy department was involved because we were looking at Boolean logic. It wasn't until the late 60s that they brought this all together into a single study. And that's the first of them. The study of information systems didn't even happen until, until we had information systems in the business, which were sort of mid-late 70s, and software engineering didn't come along until they started programming in the large, which is in the late 80s. And what they were basically was an attempt to bring together all the things you need to know in order to be able to practice that, first of all, understand it, learn it and understand it, and then practice it. Cybersecurity is going the exact same route. But, it's clear that the field itself is sort of, if you want to say what is cybersecurity, it's kind of a big picture strategic design exercise. Where you start out with a problem and then you put together a solution that's, appropriate, that fits the problem. Not too much, not too little, just right. Call it the Goldilocks principle. And, in order to do that design properly, you got to have enough altitude to be able to see the whole problem. And, that's basically what isn't happening in academia. You've got at least 3 departments in any university. We're all vying for students. We have the wagon circled around our own, kind of what we're interested in, what we like to study. And everybody else is an imposter. And so, the idea basically is to get all those wagons uncircled and get what we need to have and study. And I would make an argument that the psych department, or maybe even the folks in ROTC have got as much to tell me about, what you got to know and do, and business school, of course, as the folks over in engineering. And so, it's a lot of stuff. They say that the discipline is cross-cutting right now, which is another word for there's a lot of different people teaching a lot of different things in a lot of different places. And that's really dysfunctional. And so the idea basically is to bring that all together into one single place and study it that way, which I might add is what our center was created for. But, when we created that thing, we brought what amounts to software engineering information systems together with the cops. And so criminal justice is is in the same hall we're in, and we all work together as a faculty. And then until we're able to do that, literally as a disciplinary. When you graduate in cybersecurity, we know what you know, and the reason why we know what you know is because it's well defined and everybody understands what it is. But you talk to everybody out there, and I mean even the folks that are supposed to know better out there in industry, and they think it's computer science. Which the bad guys, want you to keep thinking, because you're basically not really addressing the problem.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your perspective, because even in my own in our own work here at the firm, we've always described our practice as being multidisciplinary rather than interdisciplinary, recognizing that there are two separate disciplines involved in our practice, which is legal and cybersecurity, that are collaborating to solve a particular set of problems, but they're not merged into one. And so I think your observation there is really on point.
Yeah, I mean, it's very dysfunctional to view any problem anywhere as partial and partly this, and you're missing the rest. I mean, it makes no sense, but that's what we do. And in the field, and what we're turning out in most cases are a lot of folks that think they know what they're doing because they've been told that's what it is. And they're just simply, it's not responsible to create what amounts to kind of a nerd, when the problems are, people stealing you blind, are really the best example, obviously, is the Snowden thing. He didn't do anything electronic. All he did was put some thumb drives in a bag and head for, I don't know, Russia. And so you got to know how to stop that. And to say, well, that's not my problem, is just irresponsible. But that's what you get from the business right now. We don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good segue into the next question, because obviously the implications of what happens in academia translate into the profession. So, I mean, you were just touching on that. But, I think, and I'll let you expand on the answer, but basically, until academia changes, the profession will remain as it is now, which seems in a lot of people's eyes somewhat chaotic and disorganized.
Well, yeah, or, sort of half-baked. I mean, the bottom line basically is that, and maybe it was easier for me because my personal, the place I come from, because everybody who's my age came from somewhere else, is software engineering. And so I'm used to, really large scale design exercises as part of developing a piece of software. And the whole point basically is any solution that you're going to put together is going to have elements to it, and those are integrated in a highly interdependent way. And basically, you got to get all the pieces together. The software doesn't work, and they've got to be kind of interact in the proper way, logically. And so the point basically when you're talking about this as a body knowledge is that you need to master that, when you get out of a program, that calls itself a cybersecurity program, you need to know all that stuff. And I might add 3 of the 8 elements have absolutely nothing to do with the computer. That's human security, societal security, which has got a lot to do with what you're talking about, and law and ethics is sort of in the center of all this. Because basically in virtual space, if you can do it, if you can get away, you can get away with anything you want to do. And so the ethics of that are sort of the question. And so if I want to basically spend a whole lot of time, collecting data about you that totally eliminates any concept of the Fourth Amendment, I can do that because you can't stop me and you don't really know I'm doing it. So why not do it? And then the last one is is human security. And the most dangerous creature out there right now is your own, what do you call system manager? He's got the God password, not you. And he's the guy who, if I'm going to target somebody, usually that's some dysfunctional nerd, who's probably never had a date in his life, and you pay him $50,000 a year, so I'm going to hand him a couple $1 million and say, by the way, hand me everything that's on your system. And, he'd probably do that. But, does anybody who's putting together a cyber defense think about it? Heck no. So at any rate, the point basically is that integrated view of of all of the elements, in a single vision, is basically got to make its way into the profession. We're educating a whole lot of people to be really narrow and short-sighted.
Yeah, I think the picture I see is that cybersecurity is and probably will continue to be a mosaic, but you have to be able to see the entire picture that each piece of glass comprises, and that the students that are emerging from the programs like yours and moving into the profession, they need to be well-rounded in their understanding of risk and as part of that body of knowledge, and I think that over time will fundamentally transform even the way that people unfamiliar with cybersecurity start to perceive the profession, and I think it will start to mold around that, which is a positive development in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, in very basic terms, cybersecurity is just risk management and access control. If you work down to the next thing, and so what risks do you have, and how do you respond appropriately? But you got to know what all the risks are, and so basically you start with an open, what do you call it, that blank slate. In fact, one of the things we teach, which is part of the actual course, the first thing we teach them how to do is to inventory their assets, because you'll end up protecting stuff and not knowing you got stuff, or the other way around. And so, you got to know what you got, and then you got to know what threatens it, and then you can put together a defense. But starting by dropping down some kind of gadget on the front end without knowing the other, the first two things, isn't really effective. And that's basically what we're trying to do with getting the professionals off. I think the confusion is it's the biggest field imaginable. And so when you drill down at any spot, you also drill down a long way. And so you get folks to look at it and say, well, at the bottom, crypto is, number theory and all that elliptic curve and all that sort of stuff. And that's a long way down from saying, well, you got to encrypt things, to protect.
Yeah.
And, so nobody can be an expert in the field. You can be sort of know what the framework looks at the top, but we turn out our profession, our students with a picture of, kind of what the entire field looks like, and tell them to drill down where they're at, what they're interested in. And so you get audit professionals next to guys that are really want to get down into the bare metal. And they're perfectly appropriate as long as they both understand that they're in the same field and they need to interact.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is a metaphor that I sometimes use or have heard used is that it's sort of an ocean, and so meaning it to imply that it's both wide and deep, and within that ocean you're going to have subject matter experts, but it helps if you can know that you're in an ocean, right? And instead of that your little piece of the water is the only piece.
Right.
So let me ask you, I guess kind of specifically, you in the body of knowledge, you identify these 8 knowledge areas. Do you see any of them taking on an outsized importance, in the coming years?
Well, I mean, human security, which happens to be one of the areas that I was an SME for this thing, and that would happen to be one of my areas. And I was offered organizational security, which is my sort of area of alleged expertise. But to me, human security seemed more important, because that's really where we're getting our lunch handed to us. The idea, basically, it's easy. The electronic guys have it easy. The computers obey the laws of physics. But trying to corral the livestock, that use the computer, I think the word herding cats has been sort of overused maybe. But, they'll think of a million ways to do you in, some accidental, some on purpose, but the amount of violations you got, and it's the big stuff, like bring your own device to work, kind of stuff, and all that sort of thing. And then sticking confidential information on your own computer, all the way down to the folks that really do want to, kind of, not to mention the social engineering problem. The awareness in a lot of ways, maybe the more important in some ways than education, just making sure that they don't click on links that say, $10,000 from Nigeria if you just click on this. And so, like I said, getting people educated to a point where they don't do you in by accident or on purpose, and then devising ways to motivate them to do the right thing, and last but not least, finding ways to keep an eye on them that doesn't involve violations of their rights. That's a brand new field. I do reviews for the top journal in the field. And I don't think I've seen one recently that was of kind of looked at electronic, ideas that people wanted to kick around at the top. Most of them have been from psychologists or people that are basically looking at, human behavior as the issue. Because if we don't solve that, we may as well not bother with, because you got the absolute killer gadget, it will keep everybody out of your system, and then it's installed by some guy. And do you trust him?
Right.
So, I mean, the bottom line basically is factoring human behavior into this. I'd put all the electronic stuff aside for a minute or 8 and do nothing but concentrate on the behavioral side and basically getting countermeasures in place to control it. But then again, I'm just me and I don't have a lot of influence, but that's part of the body of knowledge I wish that the powers that be would kind of wake up to.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting chapters of the book, and as you describe, I think it is being recognized slowly as one of the biggest challenges to deal with, and also one of the biggest areas of vulnerability that organizations have is the human element, and you have humans are dynamic, and so that makes them unlike a machine where you can configure it in a particular way, or incorporated appliance that filters in a particular way. It's hard to account for human behavior, and it's hard to account for human behavior on the attack side, let alone on your own side of the equation. And so I would agree with you that going forward is going to be a major area of study and of importance.
Yeah, and it's not just at the computer side. You probably know about SolarWinds. I mean, from you guys, the lawyers of the world probably are going to make a lot of money off of that hack, because basically it could be probably the most consequential thing that's ever happened in cyberspace, considering the fact that that particular monitoring software looks into every government system. I don't think they even want to talk about the damage that's done. But it really all started because the guy that runs SolarWinds likes to make money, and because he likes to make money, he was outsourcing the maintenance of the people that did the programming for maintenance patches to the fine country of Belarus, which is right next door to the fine country of Russia. And oddly enough, we got Russian malware in the update. Now, nobody has connected the dots yet. That's just me doing the kind of conspiracy theory thing that so popular right now in various circles. But, to me, that would seem to be something that could be litigated. I don't know. It sounds an awful lot like negligence to me. But,
yeah,
that's a human behavior issue.
It is, yeah, and I'm sure certain lawyers will find an angle there. If not us, I'm sure someone else.
I'm counting on you guys.
All right, let me take us to our last question here, which is, I think something useful to people who are up and coming, and that's, what is the one piece of advice you would want to offer either your students or future practitioners in the cybersecurity profession?
I mean, it may sound a little hippy-dippy, but just open your minds, guys. Go in without preconceptions about what this thing is all about, and be prepared to kind of view this as view the problem in its entirety without any kind of, I don't know what the right word is, kind of religious. I don't mean it religious in the religious sense, but, kind of let your beliefs, guide you in the wrong direction. The whole point here basically is to view this as a conceptual problem at the top, and we'll be in pretty good shape, because I think that it's not perfect. In fact, it's not even all that great, but the CSEC is a great start, and it kind of lays down the foundation you can build on. And so, just basically when you go in to study cybersecurity, don't start out by saying, so do I have to study programming? Which I get from students a lot. And, or, what do I need to know down at the bottom of the machine? It's like absolutely nothing. You need to start with the idea of view this as a problem, and problem solving, critical thinking. We'll start from there and work our way down to, the actual putting that particular solution together. But I mean, that sort of top level view, conceptual, strategic, whatever you want to call it. I hear from the business types that, well, that's, all academic and all that stuff, but we got our own real problems. The reason why you got your own problems is because you're playing whack-a-mole with, the hacker community without any actual kind of single integrated understanding of what you're doing. But then again, I'm just an ivory tower academic.
Well, no, I think your point about critical thinking is really relevant, and I think that is probably something that you need to possess in this particular profession, and because it is a fast-moving landscape, both in terms of the different types of exploits and the different technologies that can be exploited and the ways that can be exploited. But you really do have to be a critical thinker, I think, to succeed. So I think that is a decent prerequisite for being in this field.
Right. Well, I mean, the Sun Tzu line, and he was only, 1,300 years ago. If I know how you choose to defend yourself and I know how to attack you, that's like right out of the hacker's handbook. It's called reconnaissance. And, the point basically is to find the gap. And once you find the gap, then you got them. And there will be a gap. So the only question is where it is.
Yeah, the hole in the defenses.
Right. I mean, which you can only understand by looking at the whole problem, not just whatever you want to see. And so, don't see things, see everything. That's my advice.
No, it's great advice. Well, thank you again, Dr. Shoemaker. We really appreciate your time today and explaining the value of the cybersecurity body of knowledge and everything that it offers, not only to people in your world, but also in the world of practicing cybersecurity and working in the field. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
And if you want to get a copy of Dr. Shoemaker's book, it is available right now on Amazon. You can just type in the title and it comes up. And if you want to learn more about Relic Law's multidisciplinary data privacy and cybersecurity practice, you can go to our website at reliclaw, PLLC.com.